Welcome to the Marketing Behind Rapid Growth, the podcast where we explore the strategies, decisions, and growth engines behind some of the world's most successful technology companies. Today, we're talking about Kit. Picture this. A founder walks back from a conference dinner with a friend, a respected voice in the software world, and gets handed a verdict instead of encouragement. Your company is failing. Shut it down, or actually commit to it. There is no version of this where you keep drifting. That's where our story begins. Not with a triumphant launch, not with a viral moment, with an ultimatum delivered over dinner about a product that was bleeding out in slow motion. The founder is Nathan Barry. The product was called ConvertKit, and what happened next is one of the more instructive stories in Bootstrapped software. A company that would eventually rebrand as Kit crossed $40 million in annual recurring revenue and do it all without a dollar of venture capital. But to understand how it got there, we have to start with how close it came to never existing at all. Part 1. The Slow Bleed. For about 18 months, ConvertKit was Nathan Barry's side project. His real income came from somewhere else entirely, selling digital books and online courses to an audience he'd built himself. The software was the thing he tinkered with on the side, while his other businesses did the actual work of paying the bills. The numbers told the story plainly. Monthly recurring revenue had stalled around $2,000, and it wasn't holding steady. It was sliding, down toward $1,200. That's not a struggling business. That's a business that can't even cover its server bills. So when Hudden Shah, a veteran of the SaaS world, told Barry the truth that night, it wasn't cruelty. It was clarity. Kill it, or actually build it. The middle ground, the place where a founder tells himself he's still trying while quietly treating the thing as a hobby, was the one option that guaranteed failure. Barry went home and asked himself two questions. Did he still want to be the CEO of a software company? And had he genuinely given this thing a real chance to succeed? The first answer was yes. The second was no. So he did something that sounds almost reckless written down. He put $50,000 of his own savings into the company, hired a developer, and pushed his other profitable businesses into the background. He bet on the thing that was losing. That decision is the hinge the entire story turns on. Because everything interesting that happens afterward, the growth, the mistakes, the eventual scale, only happens because Barry stopped treating ConvertKit as a hobby and started treating it as a business that needed a real strategy, not just better code. Part 2. Finding the middle class. Nobody was serving. To understand why ConvertKit had stalled, you have to understand the market it was born into. In 2012, email marketing software had a pretty clear map. MailChimp owned the beginners. Aweber owned the direct response marketers. Infusionsoft owned heavy enterprise automation, 3 lanes, 3 audiences, all reasonably well served. Barry was coming at this from a strange angle for a software founder. He wasn't a marketer who decided to build a tool. He was a creator, a freelance designer who had discovered, almost by accident, the raw power of an audience. He once sold a design book to a small email list and made a striking amount of money in a single day. That experience taught him something simple but important. Attention, when you actually own it, is the most valuable currency on the internet. But when Barry tried to use the existing tools to run that kind of business, offer a free sample in exchange for an email, build out a timed sequence of educational emails, he kept hitting walls. He had to write custom code just to do things that should have been built in. The platforms weren't broken. They just weren't built for him. And he wasn't alone. There was an entire growing population of people like him, bloggers, authors, course creators, who were earning full-time livings from their audiences, but weren't treated as a primary customer by any software company. Not beginners, not enterprise, a middle class that nobody had bothered to design for. That gap was the opening. And Barry's first real strategic insight was recognizing it as an opening rather than just a personal annoyance. Part 3. Building in public and learning the difference between a good product and product market fit. In January of 2013, Barry launched something called the Web App Challenge. He publicly committed to taking a piece of software from $0 to $5,000 in monthly recurring revenue within 6 months on a $5,000 budget. And he documented every step of it to the audience he already had. The product that came out of that challenge reflected exactly where it came from. Instead of optimizing for big one-off email blasts the way a traditional marketing platform might, ConvertKit built professional bloggers' actual habits into the software itself. Automated sequences, an interface where a creator could write and tab through an entire series of emails on one screen, the way you draft a set of blog posts. It was, by most measures, a good product. Thoughtfully built, built in public, built with real users in mind, and it still nearly died. That's the uncomfortable lesson sitting inside this part of the story. A good product, built in the open, with real attention to user needs, is not the same thing as product market fit. Barry had built something people liked. He hadn't yet built something a large enough group of people would reliably pay for at a rate that sustained a company. Those are two different achievements, and conflating them is one of the most common ways promising products quietly stall out. Part 4. The Pivot. Nobody scales. When Barry recommitted to the company after that dinner conversation, he didn't start by rewriting code. He started by diagnosing his marketing, and what he found was the real flaw in the whole operation. He had been selling ConvertKit the same way he sold his ebooks. Content marketing, audience building, the passive playbook that had worked so well for his $40 digital products. But here's the problem. An ebook is an impulse purchase. You see it, you want it, you buy it, done. A $50 a month software platform that requires a creator to migrate their entire email list, rebuild their automations, and trust a new system with their business. That is not an impulse buy. The switching cost is enormous. No amount of clever blog content was going to overcome that kind of friction. So Barry did something almost nobody wants to do because it doesn't scale. He went and sold the product one person at a time. He personally reached out to individual creators and offered to migrate their email lists and rebuild their automations for free. No charge. Just let me remove the friction for you myself. He paired that hands-on approach with a deliberately narrow positioning line: email marketing for professional bloggers. Not email marketing for everyone, not the best email tool on the market. A specific tool for a specific person with a specific problem. That combination, unscalable personal service, plus a sharply narrow promise, is what finally gave the product a foothold. And once that foothold existed, once there was real trust and real revenue in the system, the motion shifted. ConvertKit leaned into affiliate webinars, co-hosting live trainings with influential creators, embedding itself directly inside the communities it wanted to reach rather than shouting at them from outside. It was still labor-intensive, but it worked. Monthly recurring revenue went from around $10,000 to about $100,000 over the course of 2015. And notably, through all of this, the company stayed bootstrapped. Barry pitched venture capitalists. They said no. He later described that rejection as one of the better things that happened to the business. It meant the company grew on its own terms, at its own pace, answerable to its customers rather than to a cap table. Part 5. The detours that teach as much as the wins. Growth is never a straight line, and 2 missteps in ConvertKit's history are worth sitting with because they reveal something sharper than the successes do. The first is what you might call the plain text trap. ConvertKit's own data showed that simple, typed-out email, the kind that looked like a note from a friend, converted better than polished, designed HTML templates. Barry took that data seriously. He resisted investing in beautiful design because the numbers said plain text worked better. The data wasn't wrong, but it was incomplete. It measured conversion. It didn't measure the genuine desire among a large and visually driven segment of creators for emails that actually looked good. That blind spot left an opening, and a competitor named Flowdesk walked right through it, building a substantial business on exactly the aesthetic experience ConvertKit had chosen not to prioritize. ConvertKit eventually course-corrected, adding a template marketplace. But the lesson is the important part here. When you optimize purely for what you can measure, you can go deaf to what customers actually want. And competitors are always happy to serve the want you're ignoring. The second detour was an attempt to force fit where it didn't naturally exist. Betting that musicians would embrace email as a storytelling medium, ConvertKit acquired FanBridge, a venture-backed email platform for artists in 2021, and invested seriously in courting the music industry. It didn't take. Most musicians treated email as transactional, announced the tour, announced the release, done, not as a narrative channel for connecting with fans. Meanwhile, newsletter creators turned out to be the far larger, far more natural audience all along. The takeaway is clean and a little humbling. You cannot sell a product to an audience that doesn't feel the pain it solves, no matter how much strategic logic you build around why they should. Part 6. Building the growth engine into the product itself. Here's where the story turns from a good bootstrapping case study into something more strategically significant. Email has a structural disadvantage compared to social platforms and podcasts. It's incredible for direct connection, but it has almost no native discovery built in. There's no algorithm surfacing your newsletter to a stranger scrolling their feed. If you want new subscribers, you have to go find them yourself every time. ConvertKit's answer to that problem became its most important strategic move, the Creator Network. It's a feature that lets creators on the platform recommend each other's newsletters to their own subscribers, right at the moment someone signs up. Suddenly, the software wasn't just a tool for managing an email list, it was a distribution engine. Creators using the network reported faster subscriber growth, not because they marketed harder, but because the product itself was doing part of the marketing for them. This became the company's most persuasive sales pitch, and it points to a principle worth remembering well beyond this one company. The strongest moat a software business can build isn't a feature list or a price point. It's a product that becomes its own customer's best marketing channel. When the tool itself helps people grow, leaving it doesn't just mean losing a piece of software, it means losing a growth channel. Part 7. The rebrand that almost broke everything. No telling of this story is complete without the rebrand. As ConvertKit grew beyond its original blogger niche, the name started to feel too narrow, too transactional. A name about one feature, conversion, rather than about the broader thing the company was becoming. In 2018, the company spent more than $500,000, much of it just on securing the domain, to rebrand as Siva, a Sanskrit word meaning selfless service. The backlash was immediate, and it was loud. Many people saw the use of a sacred religious concept, stripped of its context and applied to a software brand, as appropriation. And they said so, clearly and quickly. Here's the part of the story that actually matters, though. Barry and his team didn't dig in. They didn't get defensive. They listened to the people who were hurt, absorbed a costly sunk investment, and reversed the decision within weeks. Years later, in 2024, the company finally executed the rebrand it had wanted all along, becoming Kit, a name meant to signal a full toolkit for creators, not a single feature. This time, they ran the process in public, invited feedback along the way, and got it right. The Seva episode has become something of a case study in brand recovery, not because the mistake was small, it wasn't, but because of what happened after. When a company violates its own stated values, there's really only one move that works: humility and a fast correction. Not a defense, not a slow-walked apology, speed and honesty. Part 8. What this story actually teaches. So what do you take from all of this if you're building something yourself? First, niche down to breakthrough. In a crowded market that increasingly rewards whoever wins the most ground fastest, focus isn't a limitation. It's survival. ConvertKit didn't win by trying to serve everyone. It won by aiming squarely at professional bloggers first, finding defensible ground inside a brutal category, and only then expanding outward. Second, match your marketing motion to your product's actual friction. Low-friction digital goods, like an ebook, can be sold with content and passive marketing. High-friction software, especially anything that asks a customer to migrate their business, usually can't be sold that way, at least not early. It demands direct sales, hands-on onboarding, and earned trust before it can scale. Third, watch for the blind spot hiding inside your own data. Optimizing only for what you can measure can leave you deaf to what customers actually want emotionally and aesthetically, and that gap is exactly where your next competitor gets born. And fourth, build the marketing into the product itself. The most defensible kind of growth doesn't come from a bigger ad budget. It comes from software that inherently helps the people using it grow their own audience. That's the difference between a utility and a growth partner, and a growth partner is a much harder thing to walk away from. Conclusion. Kit's path, from a side project bleeding out at $1,200 a month to a bootstrapped company generating more than $40 million in annual recurring revenue, is a reminder that product quality was never the whole job. The company survived because its founder eventually applied the same obsessive iteration to his go-to-market that he'd always applied to his code. He paired unscalable one-on-one direct sales with scalable partnerships. He corrected course when the data misled him. He walked back a costly mistake the moment he understood who it hurt. And ultimately, he found a way to embed a growth loop directly inside the product itself. Building something good, in the end, was only ever half the job. The other half was engineering the path that got people to actually use it. This was the marketing behind rapid growth. See you in the next episode.